Hello, I'm Tim Lawrence, the Edexcel Psychology Subject Advisor, and this video is part 2 in a series summarising the content we shared with GCSE psychology teachers in our April to 2023 training, focusing on extended response questions. Now, the first video in the playlist, which you might have already seen, focused on feedback from last summer's exams. This is actually some training content that was delivered a few years ago, but will be new for lots of teachers and indeed students, and we hope that students will also get something useful out of this video. So we're looking in this fairly short section at command words in questions and how they indicate to students the skills that are required in their responses. So a very useful appendix at the end of the specification we would encourage students to be made aware of and to make sure they understand before they go into their exams, goes through the various command words that can be used in all types of question and what they mean in the context of this particular GCSE. We're going to be focusing today on a few of those, and in particular the slightly more complicated ones that direct candidates towards particular skills. So explain and describe are really important ones that come up a lot in those shorter answer questions. And explain requires that there is what the examiner calls a justification or exemplification. So if you're asked to describe, you just need to kind of state what the thing is, perhaps give an example to illustrate it, but you don't need to do that extra justification where you explain why something is the way it is, whereas explain does require that. Single command words will be used in Edexcel qualifications. So the idea here is that it's simpler for students to learn what exam questions are looking for, but each qualification does have its own particular sort of meaning for those command words. So it's well worth spending some time making sure that they understand exactly what we mean by explain in GCSE psychology, for example. Now, the extended open response questions, these are the 9 and 12 markers, will always use assess and evaluate. So they're really predictable. So paper 1, the core compulsory content paper, will have 2 9-mark questions at the end always. One of these on debates, and the other one will look at the relationship between core areas, and we'll look at some examples in a second. And these are designed to be challenging questions that really kind of separate the best students out. So one of the things that is difficult about them and challenging is that students have to select their own material, work out what's relevant and what they want to bring to the question, and then they need to synthesize, they need to kind of combine things and show that they really understand the ideas. And there will also be a scenario that they're given in these questions that they need to think about and respond to. The paper 2 will have a 12 marker on the research methods part of the paper, and each of the option topics will have a 9 marker as well. And they will do 2 of those because they'll do 2 option topics. All 3 questions require, again, this selection and application. So here we have some examples, and I'll just let you pause the slide if you want to read those in detail. And so here we've got examples of assess being used. Assess is always used for these 9-mark questions, and we'll talk about the meaning of it in detail in a moment. Here's another one from last summer's exam. And the final one from last year's paper 1. And moving on to 12-mark questions, here's a previous one that was asked. And I think that was last summer's one. So we finish off this short video, and if you want to have more practice at marking those questions, then we'll come back to those in one of the following videos in this series, which will be coming soon if they're not there already. Please do subscribe to this channel if you'd like to get notifications of future video content. But yes, we'll finish with a quick look at the difference between these words, and actually it is rather subtle. So I showed you a few slides ago, that glossary at the end of the specification, it says this about the assess and evaluate command words. And the following slide has our examiner's attempt to clarify this, which you may or may not find clarifies it completely, but let's have a look. So assess is about arguments, I would say, is the key difference. So the evaluate question in research methods, if you're writing about natural experiments, as last summer's question asked, or lab experiments like that other one we just looked at, then it's not really an argument about whether lab experiments are worth doing. I mean, they definitely are. So are natural experiments. But what you need to do is give a kind of a balanced discussion and then reach a balanced conclusion, which kind of reflects both their strengths and their limitations. That's for the AO3 skill here. All of these questions, as our future videos will focus on, assess both AO1, which is the knowledge and understanding, AO2, application to the scenario, and AO3, probably the hardest skill for most candidates, which is the strengths and limitations or arguments for and against. And the assess questions for the 9 markers, they're just subtly different, because here you are kind of presenting arguments and counter arguments, and you're making judgments about which are stronger. So it's a little bit less about sitting on the fence and a little bit more about kind of reaching a decision about the strength of arguments. So that's the end of this short video. The next one will look at how mark schemes are constructed, and we'll move into some practice at applying those to some exemplar responses. Thanks very much for watching to the end of this video.